Well, hello everybody, and welcome to what I think is going to be a fun little half hour, 45 minutes here as we get to meet someone from Southwestern University's faculty who is an amazing addition to the university, and she's being honored in an amazing way. We'll get to that in a minute. My name is Jim Swift, and I am a graduate of Southwestern University. Graduated in 1970. Went on to about a 3.5 decade career working for KXAN television in Austin, Texas, in the news department doing feature stories for the newscast. And so we called that On the Porch, and we are on the porch today with Dr. Alicia Moore. And let me just inform you, if you don't already know, that she is the recipient of the Ms. Homecoming Award for this year's homecoming, which means that people like you.
That's good.
I believe. Actually, it's an award that is given by the Alumni Association based on feedback from alums and based on their experience with faculty members, and they have singled out their experience with you as deserving of this award. My congratulations to you, Dr. Moore.
Thank you. I'm very humbled and honored, and I want to thank the SU Alumni Association. This actually really means a lot to me.
Tell me about that. What is it about this that speaks to you?
I guess it really says that someone recognized the hard work that I put in, the experiences that I share. I share my life with my students. I'm very honest and transparent. They know that I care about them. I do things to let them know that I care and that I try to take care of them. Hopefully that's what spurred this experience, this honor, because I do. I'm a part of Southwestern, and I live and eat and breathe education and my job.
Yeah. You know, I have seen you quoted as saying that your job at Southwestern University is your dream job. Is that an accurate
quote? It is.
Why?
So as early as, let's see, how far can I come back? So at about 4 years old, so I'll tell that story. So about 4 years old, I used to line all of my dolls up and my stuffed animals up. And I come from a long line of teachers. And so I taught. And I thought it was really, really important to teach them. They needed the knowledge that they needed to succeed, even as dolls and stuffed animals. And so I found that that was my calling. I took roll. Because I knew I either wanted to be a teacher or a nurse, because all of my dolls and stuffed animals I didn't have a hypodermic needle, so I just had an ink pen, so they all had ink stains on their bottoms. But education was what spoke to me. And so when I went on to college, I took a circuitous kind of route, because I went as an education major, and then I decided I'm really interested in psychology. So I tried psychology, and I was like, yeah, and I tried business. So I came back around to where my heart was, which was education, which led me to Huston-Tillotson University, which is an awesome program for me. But the thing that it did is it showed me that this is where I needed to be. And it did that by giving me a great opportunity to learn and grow and develop as a teacher. But when I went back some years later, they were cleaning out some drawers, and they actually found the essay that I had written when I was going to be admitted to the teacher certification program. And it said, I want to teach teachers how to teach.
Already. Yeah. You know, you mentioned growing up, that was in Austin,
yes,
Texas. You're a product of this country around here. And you, at 4 years old, you were already headed down that road. Parenthetically, let me just say that I had a stepdaughter, still do, who at about the same age, 3 or 4 years old, I was eating breakfast one morning at the table, and I heard this little talking going on over here. And so I kind of got up and looked over, and there she was, a wooden spoon in hand, and she was talking to the wall. But who she was talking to was her students. And so
Love
I
it.
relate, you know.
Love
And
it.
I looked at her, just, she turned over, caught me out of the corner of her eye and looked over at me. She said, well, what are you looking at? So believe me, I get it. You know, she did not go on to be a teacher, although she went on to be a mother, which is the same thing.
Yes.
So,
Yes, it is.
yeah, so I do relate. While we're on the subject of your growing up years and your family, I had a chance to visit with you before we started the interview here, and a couple of amazing stories regarding your growing up and your family, and in particular, your parents. Would you
Yes.
talk to me about both of them?
So, one of the things that I think affected the way I see life and the way that I savor each day was that at 2.5, my mother passed away, and she passed away in the home. My dad was at work, and I found her dead, and that profoundly impacted me in ways that I can't even fathom, as far as the ways in which I continue to see life as really precious and really dear. But it made me really much closer to my father. And when I was born, they were both much older. And so my dad, as an only child, because I was an only child, my dad really took care of me. And when I say that, we had this bond, we had this relationship. I knew I was his baby. And he just showed me what it was to be a good person. He was always kind. He never raised his voice, but he was always doing for others. He was always providing service to our community. And so he taught me a lot about life in that way. But I tell the story too that I think is hilarious. It's hilarious to me. My dad lived to be 107. He was just 2 months shy of his 108th birthday. But until 105, he actually lived with his girlfriend. And so the last 2 years of his life, he'd gotten ill. And so he lived with me, and I took care of him. He was sound mind. He just was not able to get up and walk, but he was a jokester, and it was good to be able to give back to him all that he had given to me.
Wow, what an amazing gift to
I think
have that
so.
in your life. Wow. When you talk about your father as providing service to the community, that's a big part of your life.
It is.
Not only you providing it, but you teaching other people
Yes.
to provide it. As I've read about you, that word kept popping up. I wonder if you would reflect on the importance of human beings being of service to each other.
So someone said that service is the rent we pay for our room here on earth. And I think that that's very true in my life, but I want to teach my students that it should be true in theirs as well, especially those that are going out into communities that they're going to serve, in which they may teach, within their school communities and within their communities in which they live. And I think it's really important for us to realize that none of us is alone. We're all interconnected in some way. And being able to take care of each other just shows the humanity, and it makes us recognize the humanity in others. And I think that's really important. I'm a member of 2 large service organizations, the Links Incorporated, as well as Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. And those 2 organizations, and they're national and international organizations, the main purpose of those organizations is to provide service to all mankind. And so even on the weekends when I'm not here, I'm actually providing service. So I work with those 2 organizations to meet the needs of our communities. I try to teach my students to be community engaged, in which they recognize. So all of my classes have a component in which they go out into the field, so to speak. And so they go into schools and work with students. Sometimes they go to different facilities or agencies here. They work with students who have disabilities. They work with students who are underrepresented or at risk. And so I try to teach them the importance of that as well.
All right, under that definition, when you talk about service, is this something that one does without compensation or remuneration, or is it something that you can do within the bounds of your career as well?
I think you can definitely do it within the bounds of your career, because I feel like that's what I do. There are times when I think about what my purpose is within life, within the university, and I keep coming back to the fact that I think I have something to share, and that's my service. To teach the students how to be culturally responsive, to teach them to meet the needs of their students and to find them. Sometimes they have to find them where they are educationally, and then they have to bring them along. And I think that's a service as well.
Yeah. You mentioned Alpha, Kappa Alpha.
Yes.
If people were not familiar with that organization before, surely anybody who paid attention to the inauguration of the Vice President of the United States is familiar with it now.
Yes.
Kamala Harris is a member of AKA.
Yes.
And a very exuberant and enthusiastic member.
Mm-hmm.
You could see it in her face as she interacted with her sorority sisters on that day and in days leading up to it. And now there is a Alpha Kappa Alpha chapter right here at Southwestern University, and you have something to do with that.
I do.
Tell me.
It took about 10 years to get all of the stars aligned to actually get Alpha Kappa Alpha here on the campus. The campus was ready and open, but when you are working with, we have a regional director and we have an international president, and so everybody has to sign off at the same time, including the graduate chapter that oversees, and so it was hard to get all of the stars aligned. So we worked for about 10 years. There was a woman who worked here at the inception who was an Alpha Kappa Alpha member as well. And she worked in the multicultural affairs. And so she and I worked together. She helped pull some things together. We had an organization, an interest group, but it kept falling, between the cracks because we couldn't get everything together at one time. And then the time came. And so in 2015, we chartered a chapter here on the campus of Southwestern University. And I always have to give kudos to Kappa Delta Chi because they were the first sorority of color for Latina women. And we followed, although we're not followers. But the story I'd like to tell is that in order to charter, we had to have 12 young women who were willing to put up their lives for the goal of service for the organization. And we have to do all of this paperwork and all of this. Well, the end of the night, we have this short turnaround time. At the end of the night that we were taking in their applications and all of that and reviewing them, we missed the deadline for taking all of the information and giving it to FedEx. And so I left and I tried to go around to different FedEx locations, and they were like, sorry, we're not able to get that there because it had to be there the next day. So I went home and I told my husband, I need to go to Chicago, which is where our corporate office is. And he said, well, okay, when? I said, tomorrow. It's like, tomorrow? Well, when do you need to come back? Tomorrow. So he booked a flight, and I got up the next morning, got on a flight, took that flight to Chicago, took a cab to our corporate office, walked in. I wouldn't give the paperwork to anyone but the person who was supposed to have that paperwork, handed it to her, and she asked, where are you from? And I said, Texas, because I had come all the way. But I wanted to make sure, that's how important it was to me, for Alpha Kappa Alpha to have a place on this campus, for it to be a home for young women, for it to be a safe haven for young women, and to offer them different kinds of opportunities through our programs to be able to be of service to the surrounding communities. And so I flew back that day, caught a cab back, flew back that day. But I'd love to tell that story because it just shows all of us how committed we are to making sure that this university has the opportunity for that cross-cultural, interaction, and for Southwestern to also see that if we say that we're going to be all about diversity, then we have to open our arms and our minds and our hearts to different kinds of organizations. And so Southwestern has made a home here. We are very, very grateful that we are here. and we are continuing to work for this community.
And so are there still 12 members, or?
So that's a different story. Many of them graduated, and we bring in a few that graduate. To tell the truth, we initially, the campus wasn't ready for us. You know, there were a lot of myths in which it was like, that's only for Black people, and you shouldn't even find out about them. So we had that. We had to kind of break the ice, and I think we're there now. But again, students would graduate, we bring in a few, they graduate, we bring in a few. So right now we have 3 members because of COVID. All of the members graduated.
Yeah.
And so we have 3 members now. Hopefully within the next couple of weeks, we'll have 3 more. So we'll have 6 on the campus. And we're continuing to try to build.
Yeah. While we're on the subject, there's another student organization that you're involved with, Empire, I
Yes.
think is what it's called. Fill me in about that one too. That's a different kind of
Yes,
thing, and
it
yet
is.
it's also service oriented.
So it's a socio-political organization. Because I had something to do with AKA on our campus, the young man in 2016 asked me if I would be their advisor. And I thought about it and I said, yes, I'll be your advisor as long as you're a service organization and you provide service to Southwestern and the community at large. And they said, okay. And so we have worked together, some brilliant young men. We've worked together to make sure that they provide service to the communities. And so they come up with programs. I do everything I can to support them. And so they've done some amazing, amazing things. Food drives, toy drives. They actually had a winter ball that was kind of a cross-country, not cross-country, but it could have been cross-country, but a cross-cultural event. And one of the things that they did for several years, but of course not during COVID last year, is they have a community crawfish boil. And they have it here on the campus, and it's on a weekend. And when they put it up as community, it's COMM and then capital UINTY, because it's all about the unity of our students here on campus. And again, they're phenomenal men, and they have won Organization of the Year. They did it for 2 years in a row, 2018 and 2019. So we're really, really excited. I feel like COVID has put a damper on some of the things that they do, but they are ready to roar back and get out and roll their sleeves up and start providing service as well.
Empire is established men
Yeah.
promoting intelligence, respect, and efficacy.
Yes.
So yeah, now that's not just exclusively a Black organization.
That's a great question. It is a multicultural organization. When it began, it was the same, the same myths and rumors when it began. And it is an organization that has as a mission finding a home that feels safe for African American males, but it was never about just being about African American males. So of course, you always look for advocates and allies. And so the organization has grown, and there are many members who are not of color. And so that's what we were about in the first place, and that's where we're headed, and we're continuing to grow.
You mentioned a stipulation that they be service oriented when they came to you for assistance as a faculty advisor, but you had another one, if I understand correctly, which was that they would understand that you were going to be hands-on
Oh,
in
yes.
your advising.
Yes.
What do you mean by that term?
I go, student organizations on campus are student-led. And so a lot of times, and understandably so, you give it to the students and they come to you for advice and they go away. I go to all of their meetings. So if they have meetings on campus at 8 o'clock at night, I'm here at 8 o'clock at night. I was here anyway, but I go to their meetings. I am hands-on in that. After their meetings, every meeting, I meet with the officers, tell them some things, give them some background about some things they're thinking about doing, trying to lead them in the right way as they manipulate their budget to make sure that they meet their goals and they're able to provide this service to the community. I'm just there. They can text me. I'm now that we're doing virtual calls, I'm on their virtual calls. I've put time, sweat, and money into making sure that they have what they need, because their goals are honorable, their hearts are in the right place, and I feel like, and we're talking about service. I feel like that's service as well for me, is to work with those students in that way.
Well, which I think leads us easily into the idea of you getting awarded the Ms. Homecoming honors, because that is reflective of one of the strengths of liberal arts universities in general, but I think of this one in particular, which is the relationships that develop between faculty members and students over the students' time here. If I don't know the latest numbers I saw, 15-1 roughly student to faculty ratio, or no, 11-1, but an average class size of 15. So, I mean, just structurally, that opens the door for the kind of interaction that develops.
It does.
Relationships. And when I hear you talk about the way you advocate for Empire and participate in their life as a student organization, it occurs to me that is just an example of the rest of your work here with students. Can you tell me a little bit about the sense of responsibility you feel when you interact with an individual student and as a group?
Right. So, of course, we have many outstanding and unique students. So interacting with them, of course, is situational. Each of them has their individual needs. And so I try to be really open to those needs. For instance, in class, one of the things that I do, I'm very, as a former teacher, and we didn't talk a little bit about that, at least I didn't. I started out in Austin Independent School District as a pre-kindergarten teacher. That's where early childhood is where my heart is, here as well, but that's where I began. And I watch my students as a teacher. I watch their faces, I watch their body language, and there've been times when after class or during class, I whisper, "Are you okay?" It's really important to me that within the climate of, especially now with COVID, but I also ask people to also think about things that are happening in the nation and the ways in which those are triggers for students and re-traumatization for many students. It's important to me to make sure that I have that one-on-one so that they trust me, because I want to make sure that if they need other services, that I can connect them to those services. And so it's bigger than me. I'm kind of a conduit. I look at myself in that way because we have so many amazing resources on campus, but I can't kind of nurture them and nudge them that way if I don't know what's going on with them. So I make it a point, and students will tell you they have my cell phone number. They can text me, and many of them do, even if it's about assignment, even if it's about something that's going on with their roommate or whatever, and they'll call me and they'll talk to me. And that makes me feel really good that they are trusting, that they trust me, but it also makes me feel good because I can have a pulse on exactly how they're feeling and how they're doing. As a matter of fact, in both of my classes this week, I took a day out to just meet with students. And so online, I had them working with their groups, and I met with each of them and I asked, what's going on for the semester? How are you doing? But my main question was, what can I do to help you be successful in this classroom? What do you need from me? And so that's really important for me to meet their needs academically, personally, as they go into the profession, whatever their profession is, because I also have students who are not education majors. So that's really, really important to me.
In your education classes?
Mm-hmm. In my education classes, yes.
What motivates them to take that class?
Sometimes, sometimes it's what they've heard. Sometimes they hear that it's a fun class and they take it. And I think sometimes they realize it's fun, but it's serious too. We have our moments. One of the particular classes I'm talking about is a class called School, Society, and Diversity. And so we look at several isms. We look at racism and sexism, heterosexism, and ableism. And so it's a survey class. So we're really just looking at the surface of those isms. But what we also do is connect it to society and how that trickles down into schools. And I think it connects with students who have a minor in race and ethnicity, students who are studying to be psychologists, sometimes students who are being who are pre-med, pre-law. And so I think it speaks to them, but they also, I think I'm funny. And I tell them it would behoove you to laugh even if you don't think I'm funny. So I think they don't know what to make of me at first, but I think they like my personality, and they tell their roommates and others, you should take this class. And not just because of me, but because of the content.
Because you free them to interact.
I do. I do. And I update my class. That's one of the things that I do that's time consuming, is whatever's going on in the nation, in the world at that time. The readings that we do, the conversations that we have are centered around those events.
Yeah. So that begs the question, when it comes to, you mentioned that you started off being pre-K
Yes.
teacher and that you really loved that, but you transitioned into teaching teachers for the most part, although you have non-majors in your classes. Do you have a sense, and I think you do, that when you teach those students are going to go out and teach
Yes.
other students, and those students are going to teach other students. You get a sense of your place in the process. It must be fulfilling and humbling, it seems to me.
It is.
At the same time.
One of the things that I think about too, because exponentially they're going to impact students' lives, but they also, and I also teach them that you're also going to impact the lives of those teaching around you. And so it's really important for you to be, I guess, the purveyor of that knowledge, to share, to let them know when you're working with a student who has disabilities that they have abilities. And so you have to work to meet those needs. And so a lot of times students will come back and share with me that they ended up being the team leader and that they're leading, working with students who have diverse needs, because that's one area that many universities, and I have to brag on Southwestern's education department, one of the things that we do really well is to develop an opportunity for our students. Like I said, they go out in the field and they work with diverse populations, but we have more courses that are centered on special education than most universities do. And so we do a really, really good job of preparing them to work with students. And when I say that, I don't mean that they necessarily work in areas or classrooms that are special ed, but in every classroom you have unique students with a unique set of abilities and needs. And so they can do that really, really well within their classrooms.
And of course, that is an ever-changing area of education. We have evolved as a community in the way we educate people who have special needs. At one point, putting them off to the side, and the next point, bringing them in and trying to mainstream them. And it's complicated, and it's not easy, but it's vital. It seems to me. And it is at the forefront of a lot of what's going on in education. And you mentioned what's going on in the world in general and how you have to make it relevant and bring it in. I got some notes here, and I hope you'll bear with me for just a second as I find it. Yeah. You have been, in your development, moved by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
I have.
You have. And I just want to read a little something that I think you know very well. Quote, "We are prone to let our mental life become invaded by legions of half-truths, prejudices, and propaganda. To save man from the morass of propaganda, in my opinion, is one of the chief aims of education. Education must enable one to sift and weigh evidence, to discern the true from the false, the real from the unreal, and the facts from the fiction."
Yes.
Boy, talk about relevance. That was written some time ago.
Yes.
And yet, the world we live in today, that is a challenge. And you have to equip your students with that kind of thinking as they go out to make an impact on their students?
I think one of the things that is really important, because speaking to Martin Luther King, for some, they see that as eons ago. But one of the things that I try to provide in my classes is history, as I consider myself a shade tree historian, but history as a backdrop. I think that's one of the things that's missing. We know that in textbooks, many times history is sugar-coated, many stories that need to be told, many implications about who's actually valued are omitted or they are distorted. And so that historical backdrop means so much, because once they start learning that, they recognize what's going on in today's society that's mirroring what actually had happened years and years ago, and they see that that's cyclical. So I think that that's really an important part of it. So that's my story as a historian.
Yeah, speaking of historians, I saw that you were one of, and I kind of went, wait, well, what? Historian? Because you're in the education part.
Right.
But you indicated that you were one of 15 historians that were invited to the White House.
Yes.
In 2013.
Yes.
Did you go?
I did go.
Okay.
And you know what's funny? It was right after my dad had passed away, and I really thought about not going. I was in a bad place. I was really, of course, really sad, grieving my father. And someone said, you really should go. And I was really glad that I did. It was an amazing experience. And the reason I was not singled out, but that I was able to go, is I'm a co-editor for an organization called the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. And it basically runs by the tenets of Carter G. Woodson. And Carter G. Woodson, just tell a little bit about his story, was the son of slaves. And he didn't even start getting a formal education until he was 20 years old, but always felt that education would be freeing for him. And he went on to get his master's, his bachelor's and his master's. And I'm going to ask you, where do you think he got a PhD in 1912?
Southwestern University.
I love that. That's awesome. But he actually got in 1912. He got obtained a PhD from Harvard University in 1912. Yeah. And so carrying on that legacy, his main thought was that there are contributions of African Americans that people don't know. It's one of the reasons he feels as though many are not valued, because they're not in the textbooks. What you hear many times in the media does not represent those kinds of contributions that have been made to our country and our communities. And so he wanted to, set up an organization that would provide historical backdrops, and I'll use that word, also teachers with materials to be able to extend what they're doing in the classroom. So as a co-editor of a Black History Bulletin that's published by the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, I have a big handle on what teachers need and providing all of the information that they need to extend their teaching. And so as an historian in that manner, there were 15 of us across the country who were singled out to be able to attend a meeting at the White House. And so I'm really honored to have that experience.
Yeah. Did you get to meet the president?
I came this close. I have a photo. I took a photo and he was right there through, but I did not get to. Yeah. And I didn't want to step over. I didn't want Secret Service to tackle me or anything.
There can't be repercussions.
But I came this close.
Yeah. Backing up to your story, he could have graduated from Southwestern because
he could
was
have.
Here. And that is a remarkable thing when you sit here and think about it. This has been going on for generations, and you have taken your place in it, in that ongoing process, and you are contributing to it, and people are taking notice.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, and it's quite obvious, and we had touched on some of this before, and it's so easy to kind of go hither and thither, but I want to go back to the role and the relevance of race on this campus. When I went to Southwestern, I came here in 1966. The year before, there was a fellow from Round Rock, Ernest, I believe his name was Clark.
Clark.
Yeah, you know who I'm talking about. He was the first African American to attend school here, but he wasn't a residential student. He lived in Round Rock and he commuted back and forth. So that was the year before I came. The year I arrived here, I was a freshman. I lived over here in Herman Brown Hall, actually for a year and a half till I ran out of money and had to go back home and keep sort of commuting from over here on Laurel Street. But there were two African American men my freshman year, and they lived not in my suite, but in the suite next door. My father was dean of students, and I'm thinking that wasn't a coincidence. I don't know. We never really talked about that. But it began there. And, you know, there was a situation where they tried to get their hair cut in town and they couldn't. And so the Methodist student movement here on campus arranged a boycott of that barbershop, you know, which led to lots of folks supporting the barbershop. I mean, it was a difficult thing, you know. And here we are now, what, 40, 50 years later, and you're talking about making the instruction that you provide relevant. There is an enormous amount going on in this country of change related to race and race relations, and particularly in the criminal justice system. You talked about how those things impact individual students in important ways, the way they see the world, the way they feel about the world. And yet this is, by and large, I mean, it's a majority white university. How do you traverse that land?
Very carefully.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in many different ways, because of course there's working with staff, there's working with you know, my colleagues, other professors, working with the students. One of the things I tell my students is I try to, like I said, I'm really honest with them and very transparent. And one of the things I tell them is that when I wake up in the morning, I have to think about race. When I look in the mirror, I see an African American woman, and that African American woman has to commute and come to this campus that is a predominantly white institution. And so I think we kind of, I think they kind of understand and begin to understand what's going on in the community or the nation and how it impacts me. And hopefully my colleagues understand that as well. So when we're talking about traversing, I think in order for them to traverse, I have to build a bridge to getting them to understand my own lived experiences. And so I think that that's really, really important, because I also teach them that you have to understand yourself and you have to understand your own biases. And this is for the faculty as well. I think we're moving there with many of our diversity initiatives. But for our students, they think they know who they are. And so I show them that you really don't know who you are. You're continuing to live and grow, and you'll have experiences that will continue to either fulfill you or they may challenge you. But in order to know others and value others, you have to know and value yourself. And so building a bridge for them to know themselves and then to get to understand and know me, I think that's the best way that I traverse. Others would be just working on different, I guess, committees with other faculty. I think we have a fairly open faculty to looking at diversity. You know, there are sections of our nation, of Texas, everywhere, who are tired of hearing the word diversity and see it as a menace rather than seeing it as something that actually enriches our society. And so, I keep thinking, coming back to your word traverse, I think it really means that you have to continue to make a platform, to build a platform, to build opportunities for everyone to come together in the same place.
Yeah, and traverse implies taking steps.
Yes.
Right? I mean, it is always an ongoing process. Yeah.
And a two-way street.
Yes. Well, and when I hear you talk about that, the way you approach race relations as you deal with your students, it is a two-way street. African American students bring their own biases and prejudices and cultural understandings to the lived experience here on this campus, and as do white and other people of other colors as well. And it's when I say dance or a step, it's also like a dance. It seems to me, it's just movement. There's always this movement and embrace and the refraining from embracing. I mean, another thing I saw you quoted as saying is that the reality of race and the relationships between races on this campus has ebbed and flowed, I think, were the words you used over the years. Do you find yourself frustrated?
I wake up every day frustrated. And it's not just about what's happening here on our campus, but I do know that what happens socially, in society, in our nation, trickles down, just like the course that I teach, where we look at what happens and trickles down into schools. Those same things happen. So I wake up frustrated and thinking about the fact that we have come far and we go back. So that's why I said ebbed and flowed. We've come far, but of course there are still those demons, those skeletons, those cobwebs that continue to make it difficult for us to move forward. And one of the things is you find out that conversations need to be had. When we talk about that two-way street, people need to just listen to each other. I think that's the first start, just listening to each other. I'm frustrated when people don't. And sometimes what people have to say, sometimes it's hurtful. Sometimes there are things that you don't want to hear. But from either perspective, you really have to listen to each other. And the other thing I teach my students in one of my classes, School, Society, and Diversity, you don't necessarily have to agree, but you need to seek to understand their perspective. And I think that's really powerful. You may not agree, but I can understand why someone feels this way, because if that were me, I might feel that way too. And I think that's really powerful. So I show a lot of films that juxtapose who they are with who they could be, so to speak. And I think that's really more powerful than me just telling them or them just reading about experiences.
Yeah. It's ironic that last night I was on my way to pick up some food and bring it home for my wife and I to eat. And I was listening to NPR, and there was an excellent story about a member of the Antifa movement on the West Coast and his cousin, who basically was, he's, I guess, the term they used was march, the reparations march. That's where his head was. Diametrically opposed in their politics. The one was a militia member, the other was an Antifa member. Now, he wasn't racist in that sense. It wasn't about that, but it was about Second Amendment rights and so on. And the two of them from opposite coasts found out about each other and started talking to each other. They don't agree, but it was remarkable to hear that report, that they listened to each other. They got on the phone, they texted, they talked to each other in an ongoing way. And one of them, the Antifa guy, talked about the Civil War and how he came to have an understanding of families that went to war against each other, brothers and sisters who killed each other over these things. And Southwestern has been here an awful long time. And so has all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And this university, this institution, has worked its way through the ins and outs of us trying to get along with each other and listen to each other. And here is a classic example of a university doing its job, it seems to me, in that respect. And to the degree it does its job, some days it does it better than others, and we're humans. You do your job, it seems to me, contributing to that process in a way that has caused people to take note and to respect you and honor you and to give you maybe not the weightiest name in the world, but Ms. Homecoming is what it is, and it matters. And I guess we can maybe try to wrap this up with, come back around to that. What role does this award play going forward in your life? You said you were honored, but it must be just really cool to have people say, "You go, girl."
I'm honored. I'm exhaustingly exhilarated, but I think I was a little baffled, and I'll say why. I was baffled because many times when you are, I think there's a saying that says, if you're busy rowing the boat, you don't have time to rock it or see what's going on. And I think when you're in the midst of doing what you love and doing what you feel is right and trying to make a difference in the lives of others, you don't necessarily, I mean, students tell me all the time, oh, I enjoyed the class, I learned a lot. But then you have to move on. It's a new semester. And the fact that someone, at least the SU Alumni Association, honored me, it means that someone is actually taking note, maybe in a larger way than I would even have thought about. So when I say baffled, it was kind of made me raise my head and look around and think about what I try to do within my career. And so I'm very honored.
Put a little wind in your sails?
It did. Make me sit up a little straighter.
Yeah. Good. Well, thank you so much. It's just been a delight getting to visit with you. And congratulations, Dr. Moore, once again. And good luck.
Thank you. I was going to say, I always wanted to be on a talk show. So I don't know if I was pretending in my head that you were Jay Leno or somebody, Johnny Carson, but I got my opportunity to be on a talk show.
Well, good.
And thank you for being such a gracious host.
Well, it's my pleasure. Pleasure to know you.
And you as
Thank
well.
y'all very much for joining us for this conversation. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have.